Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm Simon of Savage Reads, and today I am back with my best books of 2019 so far video. Now, if you saw my video yesterday where I was talking about sort of my reading and channel resolutions and goals and how I was getting on with them and what future plans I had, I did tease that there was 21 books in contention for this video. I have whittled it down not to 14 but to 20. And I let one non-fiction book go, which I'm feeling a bit sad about, but I will, I think at the end of the year, do a top 10, well I say top 10, possibly top 15, fiction and poetry set of books, and then a top 10 non-fiction, because this year has been a year where non-fiction has come into its own for me, as you'll see in that video. If you've not seen that video, I'll link it down below. Anyway, right, let's get cracking because we have a lot of books to talk about. So I'm going to try and whiz through these, not at stupid speed, but I feel like because I've spoken about them before on the channel in my wrap-ups, you'll have heard me talking about them. And also, I've reviewed them on Instagram and stuff, so if you want to find out more about them, head to my other socials down below. Right, first up at 20, although I don't really like to do this because actually, I would say the books, bar with the exception of maybe the top 5 or 6, the rest of them all kind of came on a par, which is why there are so many, because I've had a corking reading year. So, at 20, as it were, is My Sister the Serial Killer by Yinkum Braithwaite, which is the first book that I read in 2019. And I have a little bit of a superstition that the first book I read will kind of reflect the rest of the year. I really enjoyed that, and as you can see and will be seeing, I've really enjoyed my reading year so far. For those of you who've not heard me talk about it or kind of missed it for any reason, I'm sure lots of you haven't, because it has been so discussed, sometimes detrimentally, which I think has made me kind of want to fight for it even more and kind of made me kind of have an extra love for it too. It is about two sisters, one called Coredi, who, well, her sister, Eula, is a serial killer. It says it on the front. And she helps clear up after her sister's accidental killings. And we follow their relationship. We look at what's happened to them in their past, which may have had some effects on how all the characters that they've become. We look at Coredi, who works at a hospital and has fallen in love with a doctor who Eula then meets. They become smitten. Coredi knows what this means. What's going to happen next? She's also been telling a man in a coma all the things that her sister's been doing, and that man wakes up. So I absolutely love this. It's got lots and lots of depth to it. It's got loads of themes that you can look at, and I think it's deceptively, well, no, it's a deceptively simple read, and I think, yeah, it's a read that you can just read and really, really enjoy, but also has lots and lots of layers to it. A book that I will mention that I just read for utter enjoyment from start to finish and absolutely loved, and I think those books are really important. I know some people are like, oh, it's all about the beautiful prose, although I would say there is some beautiful prose in this and in the author's other books, but this was one that was about just completely being lost and not being able to put this book down. This is the proof copy of A Ladder to the Sky by John Boyne. I read this on holiday and almost forsaked going anywhere with anyone until I got it done. It's about Maurice Swift, who is, to put it mildly, a psychopath. And it's how he sets out to kind of gain a career within the literary world and become an incredibly famous author. The only thing is, he doesn't really have any ideas for stories. And so what he does is he steals other people's. And it's just an absolute delight. And it's just Lauren of Lauren the Books, who's on her way and could be here imminently. She described it as a book full of bastards, and it is. They're just all dreadful people, but you can't stop, well, Maurice in particular, but actually everyone's got a dreadfulness to them, but that also makes them human in a lot of ways. Absolutely loved it. Can't stop thinking about the characters. It's definitely a favourite. An author that I've grown to love over the last year or so is Jess Kidd, and I couldn't not have things in jars in my top books of the year so far. We follow Bridie, who is a lady detective in Victorian England, and she is been asked to find this missing girl, and what she thinks is just this simple case of finding a missing girl. We know there's a supernatural twist to it, and I won't give anything away more than that, or a mythical twist is actually what I'll say. But as this girl moves around, weather changes and all sorts of things. She then has a sidekick who is the sexiest ghost I've ever come across in literature, and if that doesn't want to make you read it, I don't know what will. But once again, Jess Kidd writes absolutely beautifully. Her characters are fantastic. This book has a beautifully heartbreaking tone to it in one sense, and also we go back to Bridie's childhood or youth and find out more about her, but also what happened in a previous case that's kind of made her, well, she has something extra to prove in trying to find this young girl, Christabel. So yeah, that was absolutely corking, as was another gothic delight, and that is The Doll Factory by Elizabeth McNeil, whose mugs and stuff you will know I love. And I also did a video, actually I did a video with Jess Kidd that I'll link down below. I also did a video making mugs with Elizabeth a few months ago. I've got another one coming, so I'll link those down below. Anyway, this is all about Iris and Silas, really, are the two characters that take to the fore. Iris and her sister work painting dolls at a doll factory, well, a doll shop, and Silas sees her one day and becomes kind of obsessed with her. At the same time, Iris goes off to try and make a life as a painter and ends up kind of with the Pre-Raphaelite gang. And yeah, it's just absolutely... Do I mean Pre-Raphaelite or do I mean Raphaelites? I've got that completely wrong. Anyway, Pre-Raphaelite, I was right. Sometimes I question myself. Anyway, it's brilliant. And what I love about it is it starts off with this really rich, voluptuous kind of love story and then just get darker and darker and darker. Highly, highly, highly recommended. A book that lots of people were raving about last year, I wasn't sure I was going to feel about and absolutely loved and completely surprised me, is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Atessa Moshfegh. I think this is an incredible character study of grief and loneliness and isolation. It is told through a character that you are not going to like necessarily from the off. She's very privileged. She has managed to organise all of her finances so that she can literally pretty much sleep in a drug-induced state for an entire year. Now, that also doesn't sound like it would necessarily be a particularly gripping or thrilling novel. You know, somebody sleeping for a year. How interesting could it get? But it's so brilliantly done. And it's also, you know, she does have to have people that come into her life, which we look at some relationships you have with a friend slash frenemy and also an on-off lover. But we also look at the crux of why this girl has decided to shut herself off and why she feels she needs this year of rest and relaxation. And yeah, I just thought it was masterful in many, many ways. A poetry collection, the first of two, is Jen Campbell's The Girl Aquarium. I adored this, and not just because I know Jen and felt her in the book, which is interesting when you know somebody who's written a book and their characteristics shine through, which are the characteristics you love because you love them. I find it quite difficult to, well, not quite difficult. I find it that it can come across like, oh, I'm just picking up one of my friends. Genuinely, this collection is absolutely wonderful. I love all of the poems in dialect because they're from the north of England, near Newcastle, where I lived for many years. And I love the queerness throughout it. I love the sort of fairy tale and folklore and all the seaside shenanigans that go on here. And yeah, there was a poem in here particularly that absolutely made me weep. And yeah, I can't recommend this enough. Then a book that is definitely not perfect, but I've forgiven how bonkers it goes at the end because I think it's kind of brilliant for doing so. And that is Elif Shafak's 10 minutes, 38 seconds in This Strange World, which follows Leela Tequila after she dies in the 10 minutes and 38 seconds that the final synapses in her brain are working, and she sort of goes back to various different points in her life, not always in chronological order, and we also encounter 5 particular people who've been very important to her, and it's tastes that she sort of remembers and smells that bring these memories back. So we start off with salt, and it links into some folklore around birth and salt with babies, which happened to Layla, and then takes her from this family setting away and into the streets of Istanbul, where she works as a sex worker. And it's just incredible. The characters that she meets and befriends are fantastic. And there's a twist that comes on later that I don't want to spoil too much, but they suddenly come to the fore and go on this kind of I can't say adventure, but it's a pilgrimage in a kind of way, but also a kind of adventure, and it's trying to set things right. That's all I'll say. But the character's amazing, the writing's beautiful, the atmosphere. I mean, the streets of Istanbul just come so to the fore. Yeah, I loved it. I've been meaning to read Elif Shafak. I shall be reading a lot more because I think she is a fantastic author. Then a book that I've definitely talked about a lot is An American Marriage by Tiara Jones. This won the Women's Prize this year. This is about Celestial and Roy, who get married quite quickly after they fall in love. They go away one weekend. Roy helps a woman close her hotel door, which is faulty, and then they are raided and he's arrested for raping her. We know he didn't do it, they know he didn't do it, and we follow them from there and what happens when he's incarcerated and then when he comes out. There's a set of letters in this that I absolutely loved and almost broke my heart when they are writing to each other, and it's all the stuff that's unsaid but also the stuff they are having to say to each other, yet we learn what's going on behind those letters too. Brilliant. Non-fiction wise, have I mentioned any non-fiction yet? No. So the first of my non-fiction is Out of the Woods by Luke Turner. And again, this is a book that completely surprised me. I listened to it on audiobook, and this is Luke has broken up from a relationship which he felt fell apart because he was having issues with his sexuality. Well, not with his, he's not having issues with his sexuality, but his sexuality was causing issues in his relationship. He's bisexual, and he talks about that. He talks about the religion in his family and how that's impacted him because of his sexuality. And he also talks about Epping Forest and woodlands and how important they are to him as he tries to sort everything out in his mind. So it's an incredible book about nature, religion, sex, the works, and it's just, frankly, told and fantastically written. So yeah, absolutely love that. Another book that I'm going to keep saying it. Another book I loved all of these, is The Rapture by Claire McGlasson, and this was a real treat. This is based on the true cult, the Panacea Society, which was set up between the wars, and this follows Dilys, who is a member of the cult and who is kind of questioning everything about it, and she isn't sure if she believes in it fully and what's going on. She then meets another young woman who she brings into the fold, and from there the questions become bigger, but also at the same time she becomes more centered to staying. I don't want to say any more than that because it's got some lovely quirky twists going on. I will say there are some queer shenanigans that follow, and I thought it was brilliant in all sorts of ways. Fantastic characters, brilliantly told, had me gripped. Can't say more than that, can you? No, well I could. Then at 10, we have Remembered by Yvonne Battle-Felton, which was probably my favourite book on the whole of the Women's Prize long list that I hadn't read before it started, if that makes sense. Although I think it could be in contention as one of my favourites, full stop. Anyway, this tells of Spring, who her son Edward has been involved in a trolley incident in Philadelphia. It's 1910, I want to say. Yeah, 1910. See, I shouldn't question myself, should I? No. It's 1910, and it's believed that this is something to do with race rights and a racial act. And so we have that going on, but then her sister Temper turns up. Temper is a ghost, and they start to tell Edward the story of him and how he came to be, going back through their past. And in doing so, we learn the past of both Temper and Spring and how they were born into slavery and what happens. And this is something that I think is particularly brilliantly written about because we don't hear about it a lot. What happens after they become free? What do you do when you have been held in that system for so long and suddenly the world is open to you? What follows on from there? Absolutely brilliant. I thought it was incredible. Then we have more non-fiction, and this is probably the book that I would most like to curl up with endless cups of tea and a big box of chocolates over the autumn and read again. It is The Adventures of Maud West, Lady Detective by Susanna Stapleton. I talked about this in my recent wrap-up. I just loved this. We go on an adventure of detection with Susanna Stapleton as she tries to find out who on earth Maud West was, not just because she's only sort of briefly mentioned every so often in history, and Susanna Stapleton is a big fan of all things detection, but also because she actually is a huge enigma, and her life could seem even more far-fetched possibly than some of the stories she told. And we get her stories in here which read very like slightly camper, much more far-fetched versions of Sherlock Holmes tales, and I loved them too. So the mixture of this going on this adventure and almost being like Susanna's sidekick as we find out more about Maud along with those stories was just absolutely joyous. So highly recommended. So they come out recently. I listened to an audiobook. I listened to it on audiobook, and I shall be coming up with that, like I said, in the autumn again. Then another collection of poetry, Bury It by Sam Sachs, which I read at the very beginning of the year. This is a book that I bought when I was in San Francisco last year because lots of people were raving about it. And this is a book that's all about queer, not just sexuality, but queer identity. It's about desire and love. It's about the suicide rates for queer young men particularly, and there's a lot of water and bridges and things involved in this, and I just found this incredibly haunting, incredibly moving, and I adored it. And it's a poetry collection that I would like to reread. I don't say I'd like to reread books very often, but I think poetry particularly is one, and then obviously, like I said, a good old cosy one you can't go wrong with either. Actually, speaking of cozy, Susanna Stapleton says in this book, which also made me fall in love with it, that she will take a week out every year where she just literally curls up with treats in front of a log fire and detective fiction and just reads that for a week. That should be some kind of retreat, I think, frankly. Anyway, sorry. Moving on to more non-fiction, some non-fiction fest, frankly, is Kerry Hudson's Lowborn, which I've spoken about a lot on this channel and actually did a video with Kerry about. I'll link that down below too. This is Kerry writing sort of, well, in the last couple of years, as she goes back to her childhood, and as the subtitle says here, growing up, getting away and returning to Britain's poorest towns. And she goes back to the places of her youth and also finds files about how she ended up in some of the situations she did. And it's a beautifully written, moving, well, it's beautifully written, but it's also blunt and kind of brutal at the same time, which I love that concoction. And I should say, I am friends with Kerry, and it's very like with Jen, when your friend's characteristics comes out to the fore in their writing, it's just a delight. But it's a really important book about what is going on in the country and how we are sort of ignoring poverty and these people who are ending up in this systematic cycle. But yeah, I'll link the video, like I said, to me and Kerry talking about it more so that you can get more of a flavour. Then a book that when I finished it, I had a quibble with it. Since then, it's grown on me so much I can't even remember what the quibble was. And that is Happiness by Aminata Forna, another author that I've been meaning to read for years and finally got round to. And this is a tale of Attila and Jean, who Attila has come over from Ghana to, he's a psychiatrist and he's come to give a speech. He comes quite often, so he feels like it's almost a home from home in the hotel that he stays at. And Jean has come over from America because she's studying urban foxes and what's going on with them in the city. And this is a description basically of, well, we get an insight into London from all the people who've chosen to move there, not anybody who's originally from there. And I loved that. What I also loved was the relationship that builds between Attila and Jean when Attila's great nephew goes missing and he asks the help of the people who work at the hotels and she asks other urban fox hunters to help him find them. And then it's how their sort of friendship relationship blooms from there, but also it looks at how nature is coming to these cities from all sorts, like you have the parakeets in London, and actually the hardback had the parakeet on the cover. So it looks at all of that and it's just brilliant. And it's a book that really made me think. It's very much a book about territory and about how people feel about people coming into their territory. But I think it's brilliant showing how all these amazing new things are coming in, where some people can see them as a threat, which obviously reflects on certain horrible parts of society, frankly. So yeah, brilliant book. Then the first of two Australian non-fiction books, which just, incredible. The Arsonist by Chloe Hooper. This is A Mind on Fire. Looks at the fires in 2009, which were some of the worst ever. They had the impact of 500 atomic bombs. And it looks at the people who survived, some of who sadly died. It looks at the people who investigate, and then it looks at the culprit. And this is the kind of book, along with the next one, which will take the top of your head off, pour loads of thoughts to it, put the top on, shake it away and say, rethink everything you might think, particularly on culpability with this book. So yeah, absolutely fascinating. And the other one that did the same thing for me was The Trauma Cleaner by Sarah Krasnosti. Again, I thought this is incredible. Sarah looks at the life of Sandra Pankhurst, who is a trauma cleaner. She goes and clears up either hoarders or after murders, suicides, the whole gamut. And we find out more about the people that she cleans up for, these outsiders in society, and then also find out more about Sandra, who has been, and some people may say still is in some ways, an outsider herself, rightly or wrongly. And we find out about how she transitioned, what happened in her youth, the family that she had before she transitioned, and how she had to survive after she transitioned. Incredible. Then, the final fiction, and we're in the top three now, is The Wallow Experiment, which I talked about recently by Alex Nathan. This is amazing. This is all about, it's based on a real advert that went in the newspapers. Again, I talked about this in my wrap-up recently, where a man put an advert out to say that if somebody would live underground for 7 years without human contact, but with luxuries like books, bedding, food, all those things, they would get a reward of £50 a year. This is in the late 1700s, I should say. And this is a fictional account of what may have happened there, with Herbert, who advertises it, and John, who responds, and we follow both of them. Now, I thought it might just be about them, and therefore not necessarily, I don't know, I was a bit worried that might not be quite enough, even though John's story is he's underground and goes a little bit bonkers, is fascinating. Actually, we learn about John's wife, who kind of builds a relationship with the house in a very different way. And then we also hear from all of the people who work in the house and their thoughts on this experiment, how they may or may not get involved in certain ways. Again, utterly brilliant. Final two, and we have The Five by Hallie Rubenhold. And this book, this and the next one have competed as my number one for quite a while. This was number one until very, 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 very recently. This book is just incredible. It looks at the untold lives of the women killed by Jack the Ripper without really talking about Jack the Ripper, which is brilliant because it looks at why have we created a legend from a monster? Like, why has that happened? And yet these women are just known as victims, prostitutes who he killed, and that's it. Is that all they're worth? As we learn, they had so much more to them than that. They weren't actually all prostitutes. They had these incredible lives. And I think Hallie has given an incredible voice to these sadly quite forgotten, well, they're not forgotten, but what they're remembered for is generally the pictures of their mutilated bodies, but they're forgotten actual stories of these women who were real women who mixed with all sorts of society and did some amazing things. And I am forever thankful for Hallie writing this because it just absolutely blew me away. Again, listen to this on audio, but would read it again, cover to cover. I wept throughout. And then a book that I've read only very recently but has completely and utterly blown me away is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. And this tells of a young man writing to his mother who he knows probably won't be able to read the letters, which is an interesting construct because you can tell everything in that way. But he looks at his childhood with her and how she was quite volatile because of what she'd been through in Vietnam, where they moved from to America with his grandmother Lan, who was just wonderful. The character's called Little Dog, and I love this. I've mentioned this every time I've talked about this book. I love this because in Vietnamese tradition, if you name something ugly, it means that horrible spirits or horrible people will keep away from it. So she calls him Little Dog because she doesn't want anyone to take him away. Anyway, it's about the culture collide when they get to America and how they all deal with that. It's about the trauma of what's happened. It's about Little Dog coming to terms with his sexuality as he grows up. And I just think it's a book that's haunted me a lot because I haven't quite experienced anything like it. It just chimed with me in this amazing way, but also the writing is so stunning. There are certain paragraphs and sentences here that just, it just makes you think, well, why bother ever writing anything ever again occasionally? But yeah, I absolutely love this and highly, highly recommend it. I know it's had a lot of buzz, but it's totally deserved. Whew, so there we go. Sorry, that was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. I thought I'd be able to do that in 10 minutes. It was I fooling. But those are the books that I have loved most so far in 2019. Let me know your thoughts on any of them and let me know what your favourite books have been if I haven't mentioned them, because I would like to have some more recommended to me. I'm a little bit nervous now though, because what happens if I read more amazing books? How am I going to whittle this lot down with any extras? But at the same time, of course, I want to read more amazing books in the rest of this year. So I'll be back on Tuesday, either with a video with lovely Lauren of Lauren and the Books, who I said is on her way, or I'll be talking about the books I'm surprised I haven't got to yet so far this year and really, really need to because I was very excited about them. So I will speak to you all very, very soon. Bye.